I'm Batman.
I hardly think so. The real Cape Crusader calls his crime-biting cohorts when he's running late.
I had to walk. I couldn't get Raj on the back of my scooter.
I said this before and I'll say it again. Aquaman sucks.
And welcome in it, everybody. Thanks so much for being with us here on Tactics the Geekend. Happy Friday to all of you. And as you can see, we are broadcasting despite the COVID-19 pandemic here in the state of Alabama. And we are going to have actually 3 guests with us. So we've got a full house tonight for our top 10 video. This is going to be the top 10 Nintendo 64 games of all time. So let's go ahead and welcome our guests on. Andrew, Justin, and Chris. Welcome in, guys. Oh no, the Asian's gonna give us coronavirus. All right, that's enough of that. It's a fun gimmick. That's about all the time it deserved. All right, so this is this is one I've been wanting to do for some time. I mean, like ever since I originally thought to do the Geekend, I knew that we were going to do this video at some point. Nintendo 64 was my very first console. I'm super excited to do a countdown of the best Nintendo 64 games of all time. So we'll go ahead and get into our top 10.
The Tactics Top 10.
Now, for those of you that are new to the top 10 on the Geekend, this is how this works. Each one of us, all 4 of us, by ourselves, without conferring or anything, put together a list of our top 10 favorite Nintendo 64 games, and each one of those votes got points assigned to it. So, for example, if I picked something as my number 1, it got 10 points. If I picked something as my number 2, it got 9 points, so on and so forth. And then we put them all together, see how the points come out, and that's how we decided what were the top 10 Nintendo 64 games of all time. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
Number 10.
Number 10 on this list, 007 GoldenEye. And I know that's very stereotypical of a Nintendo 64 top 10 list. I mean, it's going to be on just about every one. But full disclosure here, I don't know anything about this game because my extensive experience with this was playing, I think, maybe 2 rounds in a frat house at college. That's the only time I've ever played this game. I'm horrible at first-person shooters. The only thing I know about this game is that it's unfair to play Odd Job, and that's only because it became an internet meme. So I'm going to defer to the guy that voted for this particular one. Andrew, go ahead. Why is 007 GoldenEye worthy to be on the top 10 Nintendo 64 games of all time?
Like, it was really the first-person shooter I'd ever played when I think about it. But it was so in line. Like, so many games these days are made, and some of them are based off like movies, or they're based off of books and things like that. Even some of them are based off of previous video games. But with GoldenEye 007, it was almost to a T exactly how the movie happened. Like, every level happened from the very first part of GoldenEye 007, the movie, where they jump off the dam. That was the first mission that you go on in GoldenEye. And it played out the rest of the way, all the way through the last mission, which, if you haven't played it by now, I'm not ruining anything for you at this point. You go up against 006 at the very end, and it's literally step by step, just like the movie. Every single level, every single character. And then they add in 3 levels at the end that are based off of previous movies. Back with, like you had mentioned, Odd Job and Moonraker's in there, and a couple other ones. And it was just so cool. And the progression series or sequences you had to do to go through it. You had to beat every level on easy to unlock the next level. And then to unlock the next level on hard, you had to beat the first level, and then the second level and third level in order on hard. And then on the hardest level, you had to do all 3 of them and get everything completed with time crunches. Like, you actually had to do it in a certain amount of time. like a lot of games almost feel like they get their roots in a bunch of the things, a bunch of their little. Oh, I don't know what word I'm looking for. Like they get a bunch of their play style and a bunch of their ideas
influence?
from GoldenEye 007. Yeah, their influence. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like a lot of it comes from 007 because I can't remember previous to 007 when we had a game that was this in depth and required this much to have an unlocked system and have 30 something levels in it, tons of guns, cheat codes galore with Game Genie, which made it all the more fun to play. So. I could go on forever about this game because I spent way too much time playing it over one summer. So that's why it was on my list.
Well, I got to tell you, Andrew, and I love your enthusiasm for it, but you brought up a point that even as somebody who didn't really play the game or appreciate the game himself, I really appreciate most movie games suck. And the funny thing is, the video game movies that are the movie video games that don't suck, like some of the Star Wars games, they're typically games that don't follow the plot of the movie, that take a departure from that storyline that wind up doing really well. So it's interesting to me that one of the things that was really great about the game, according to you, was actually that it did the opposite of that and followed very closely with what the movie did. So
No, I agree with what you were saying about the movie video games. I remember the Spider-Man games being fun.
true, but they
childhood opinion. I'm not sure if I would still think that, but I'll leave it as is. But in general, yeah, movie games awful.
That's generally true, but even the Spider-Man games that were good, because whenever someone asks what's my favorite movie video game of all time, I'm going to say Spider-Man 2. But the thing about Spider-Man 2 is it has kind of roughly the plot of the movie and then a whole bunch of stuff that's not in the movie. So there is a little difference, I guess, there.
Number 9.
Number 9 on this list, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. And I'm going to be perfectly frank here. I am furious that it is this low on the list. Because this is not only my favorite Nintendo 64 game, it is my favorite game of all time. I seriously cannot think of another game that I love more than The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. The fact that you can kind of speed run through it and not do a whole lot of the stuff and still wind up winning the game, even though it's really, really hard to do, or that you can really take your time, go through all the storyline, and there's a lot of storyline, a lot of side quests, and get all 24 of the mask and then wind up just destroying people. The fact that you can really get to sort of pick and choose what game style you like better, actually somewhat, I think, may have inspired Breath of the Wild. Because in a lot of ways, that's a feature that Breath of the Wild has, is that you can either try to run to Ganon as quickly as you can and only do about half the stuff and be pretty good and at least take a shot at Ganon, or you can really take your time, gather everything, and feel like you're adequately prepared and go to town on the boss. So there's a lot of things that, even though you can't see its influence directly on the Legend of Zelda series like you could Ocarina of Time, I love Majora's Mask. It's a much more personal tale, and the side quests in it are just amazing. I mean, you can get lost doing the side quests and almost kind of forget there even is a main storyline with how detailed some of these things are. And the thing that I like about it the most, and I promise I'll shut up about it after this, the thing I like about this game the most is that every Zelda game really emphasizes exploration. This is the only Zelda game that really emphasizes exploration not only through space, but also through time. Because when you're exploring, for example, a 3D space, trying to check out where the switches are and how you're going to be able to solve this puzzle, the difference about Majora's Mask is, over the course of these 3 days you're constantly repeating, you start learning certain things that happen on specific times on specific days. And so it rewards you not only for exploring the space once, it rewards you for exploring that space over and over again, being observant, piecing together what events happen at what particular times, and in order to make them to work together to solve side quests. It really makes you explore time in a way that I don't think any game before or since ever has done. And that's one of the reasons I think this is one of the best games of all time. It's still my pick for, I think this is the best game that's ever been made.
That's an excellent case. I especially, I mean, like I mentioned privately, I never actually played through the game. But being a huge Zelda fan, I am aware of mechanics of the game and lore and whatnot. I especially appreciate games where you get to completely change up, like you do with the masks, change up what kind of environment you are able to traverse and, you know, how you interact with things. It was because Link Between Worlds did that mechanic pretty good. And where you could, you know, become two-dimensional in the wall and whatnot, but how you could turn into the Zora Link and, you know, get to places underwater, how you could turn into the Goron Link and get through places where you wouldn't normally be able to. And yeah, and I remember seeing videos of analyzing the lore and talking about how it goes through the different stages of grief and how the whole game is about Link dying, for instance. And, you know, it is the same incarnation. Most Zelda games use different incarnations of Link. This one is the exact same incarnation of Link that was used in Ocarina of Time, which is a pretty cool aspect of it. I think the only other game that does it is the Spirit Tracks, following the Wind Waker Link, I believe.
No, actually, Spirit Tracks is a different Link. Phantom Hourglass is the same one.
That's right.
Yeah.
Admittedly, didn't play either of those two, but
well,
I was always a huge fan of the top-down 2D. My first Zelda game was Link's Awakening, so that style.
Number 8.
Now, number 8 on this list is one that more than one person voted for. So we're starting to get into some that we'll be able to talk a little bit more about as a group. Pokemon Stadium 2.
All right, finally a game that I played. Sorry about making that go down because of my non-vote.
You're so uncultured.
So Pokemon Stadium was the first glimpse of what we all knew we really wanted out of Pokemon. Of course, everyone enjoyed the Pokemon Game Boy games, but what you really wanted was to have a three-dimensional, you know, battle in a gym or in some sort of stadium, like you saw on the TV show, right? What's the opening of Pokemon, the first anime, right? The first season. Very first thing you see is this battle inside of a stadium between two Pokemon, right? So this is what we really wanted from watching the show growing up as kids. And so that's what it gave you. Not only that, and I don't know, I don't think Nintendo may be as good now as they used to be about incorporating their mobile. Of course, now the mobile and the console is the same thing, right? But back then, it was really innovative to be able to take the Game Boy games and plug them into the N64, plug them into the NES, things like that, or the SNES. And so being able to hook up your Game Boy game to your N64 and play your team against your friend's team in Pokemon Stadium was huge. You know, that was really, really big and innovative for the time. And also the minigames. The minigames were awesome.
Yeah, I think
nobody wanted to link cable battle anymore once that came out.
That's true.
It felt so underwhelming.
You spent all your time playing the mini games, and you know, one thing that you brought up about that I wanted to talk about, you have to remember that unlike the GameCube and unlike the Super Nintendo, the consoles coming directly before and after the N64, Pokemon Stadium was the only way to play a Game Boy game on the Nintendo 64, which I find fascinating because that's a feature that they had on the console before and after it, but didn't really have that. So the only game you could play is Pokemon, and the only way you could play it is through Pokemon Stadium. So yeah, that was another really cool feature.
Oh, well, that was my number 2 on my list because exactly like Chris was saying, it was the first major step towards Pokemon being what you wished it would be. I mean, I was such a Pokemon nerd as a kid. I went around with my little club pretending that Pokemon were real and, you know, basically LARPing. But, yeah. And you know, it had certain disappointments, which, yeah, I guess I can recognize as a limitation of having that many unique characters And it's like, oh, I wish they would actually make contact when they hit each other. But with special attacks like flamethrower and all, it's so satisfying to see. Yeah, basically making your own TV show battles. And that was definitely one of my go-to N64 games.
This is going to be sad, but it actually didn't even make it on my top 10 list, the first or the second one. And the thing is I like the RPG games better. I know that at the time it was super innovative and had never been done before, which was really cool. But a couple of things. One, I didn't have access to the way to play my Game Boy game on the N64. Or was it N64? Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have a way to play that. And I think at that time I owned red, blue, and yellow, and I just kept constantly playing them through and resetting them just for the fun of it. And so I just kind of got stuck on that. I'm not saying I love the game, but it didn't make my list simply because I like the RPG games better for Pokemon. I think it was a gorgeous game, though. Wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, for the time, and this kind of goes back to what the other two were saying, the thing that was cool about it is it was N64 graphics, so it wasn't exactly breathtaking, but, you know,
it was back then.
It looked a lot more like what you imagine Pokemon should look like than the Game Boy games did, especially when you considered that even by the time Pokemon Stadium 2 came out and we had Gold and Silver and they were on the Game Boy Color, I mean, 8-bit graphics, even in color, that pales in comparison to what it looked like on the Nintendo 64. And I mean, I remember my friends and I, when we popped it in for the first time, we were just like basically sitting there in awe. And they even made some graphical upgrades from Pokemon Stadium 1 to Pokemon Stadium 2. Pokemon Stadium 2, despite being on the same system, looked like a significantly better game than 1 did. So they really took their time. It wasn't just a straight port. They really brushed up the attacks. They brushed up the interface and everything. And by the way, I would like to point out on Andrew's comments, what we just recently read or what we just recently heard from him is that basically he's been playing Pokemon exactly the same way since he was 8 years old. So that was fun to learn that you do exactly the same thing now as you did then.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that shows the longevity of the franchise for sure. But I really like Pokemon Stadium 2 for what it was and the time that it was like the freaking moon landing, being able to play Pokemon battles on a big stage like that. And Pokemon Stadium 2 really did a great job with that.
Well, to Andrew's point, I wouldn't really see it as something in competition with the RPG games. I would see it as an expansion of the RPG games, something in addition to something that enhances the RPG games. And of course, now you almost the latest games, it almost looks like Pokemon Stadium was incorporated into it. Yep. The battles on the newest games look like Pokemon Stadium battles, except better.
Well, I remember when X and Y came out, the first thing I thought when I saw that trailer was finally something that kind of looks like Pokemon Stadium. Mm-hmm. Like I've been waiting for Pokemon to look like Pokemon Stadium since Pokemon Stadium came out, and it never really did.
Number 7.
Number 7 on our list is one that I think a lot of people probably weren't anticipating, but I was thrilled to see that so many of y'all liked this game too. Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards.
It's so good!
I know! I don't know why it's not on more lists, but I love Kirby 64. So,
everybody voted for that.
We did. Every single one of us put it somewhere on our list. I tell you what, we'll go ahead and start with you this time, Andrew. Take it away.
Yeah, let me just go ahead and say I'm the one who didn't put it on my list.
That's why I went with you first.
Defend yourself.
I actually didn't even know this was a game until I saw the list that you sent us. So
you missed out.
I'd love to hear what y'all have to say about it. I know it was Super Smash Brothers, but that's not it. So tell me about Kirby, y'all. Tell me.
Yeah,
shoot, you had like 8 different power types, and you could combine them. So that leaves you.
2 at a time.
You have the base power. And then you can make any combination of 2 powers. So that's like, what, 72? 64 plus the regular 8? 72 different power combinations. And this is in the early days of the internet, too. So, like, it's not like you had some sort of reliable guide that you could just Google real quick. So it was all about discovering, well, what if I combine fire with rock? Oh, I'm a volcano shooting molten rocks now. What if I combine ice with electricity? I'm a refrigerator spitting out food. What? Like, what if I mix the cutter with rock? I can sculpt myself into a bird and fly and cannonball into all the enemies. This is great.
Yeah, actually, the cutting and rock is one of my favorite combos because I used to, like, if you got the quail, you felt like you were unstoppable.
Yes.
But no, I think Justin really highlighted the thing that I really loved about that game too, which is the combo. And they did such a good job on the level design, not even necessarily on the levels themselves, but specifically making to where you could only get certain combos in certain levels, and it never felt like you were just using the same power combos over and over again. There was a constant discovery, not only of the levels themselves, but also your own powers by making it to where you only had certain element combos in certain levels. I mean, just a phenomenal idea for a game. And I really think that it holds up even till today.
Same thing. You get to play it your way, because there's so many combinations. You can go through any level in any of the possible combinations you can get on that level. The level design was great anyway. I even like the boss battles. But yeah, just the ability to explore all those different combinations of powers, because that's what Kirby is, right? You're borrowing powers from the enemies you defeat.
Right,
and
he's the Kakashi of the Nintendo universe.
And being able to mix and match all those things was just really, really fun. It gave the game longevity because you could continue to try out different combinations.
And what is it with Kirby and Creepy? That final boss, like the little fallen angel, little whatever that was super creepy, man. Yeah.
See, Kirby has this thing, and this actually, I think, sort of leads to the charm of the game. Because Kirby is a platformer that's even easier than Mario, like it's very much geared towards the younger demographic. I feel like the designers behind Kirby always want to incorporate two different sides of it. They want the cute, cuddly Kirby with the goofy-looking bosses that are really kid-friendly. And then if you are hardcore enough to actually wind up going on and wanting to beat the game, they up the creepy factor. So it's almost like they make it to where you can enjoy it whether you're a hardcore fan or you're just a casual little kid that wants something cute and cuddly to play.
Which I don't know if y'all have downloaded the demo for the new Kirby game that is coming out on this, or just came out on the Switch.
I haven't, but
it has that combination mechanic again. Like you can combine a sword with fire and have a flame sword, stuff like that.
Okay, so since we've all mentioned that, and that was such a big part of the game that we liked, I know, Andrew, you're going to be exempt from this because you didn't really play the game, but what is your favorite Kirby power combo in this game? Board?
That's a tough one. Even the double fire, something as vanilla as that, was super cool because you turn into this giant flaming phoenix thing, and there's the fire and the cutter, the flame sword.
Right.
There's, like we were talking about, the cutter and the rock to turn into a little bird that just smashes through everything. The cutter honestly, the cutter was pretty solid no matter what you combined it with.
That's true. I can't think of a single cutting combo that I didn't like.
Yeah, the cutter with the ice, and you turn it into a figure skater.
Yeah, which was
and slice people up with your skates.
Yeah, that one didn't look really cool, but it actually was really good. Like it was functionally really good. What about you, Chris?
I'm gonna have to go back and look up some of them because I can't even remember them all. Like I'm looking at a list now. Remember, Bomb and Ice turned you into a snowman, and you were walking around with the bomb planted in you.
That was pretty cool.
Cutter and Needle with the giant jaws that popped out of you. If you doubled Needle, then it would be like a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to choose because there's just so much cool stuff.
There were, but I think that probably my favorite was lightning cutting. Because you got a double lightsaber just like Darth Maul.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And that was my go-to. That's the one I always wanted to have. Partly because I'm a Star Wars nerd, too.
And the lightning and needle, you turn into a lightning rod.
Oh, yeah, that one was really cool.
Cutter and Ice, you could ice skate.
Yeah, we just talked about that one.
Yeah, I just saw that one again.
Oh,
yeah.
The drill was so good.
Oh, the drill was awesome. Man, I've even forgotten a bunch of these.
Yeah, I'm looking them up. Needle and stone was the curling stone. That was the only reason I ever knew what curling was. And I saw the Canadians in the Olympics. It's like, oh, they're playing Kirby.
Yeah, I had no idea what that was until I went back and pulled out my old N64 like a decade later and was like, oh, that's a curling stone. I just never knew what it was before then.
Yeah.
Number 6.
Number 6 on this list, Star Wars Rogue Squadron. So this time I'm going to let you lead, but you'll actually have something to say. Andrew, why is Rogue Squadron number 6 on this list?
I mean, I could just say 2 words and I could shut off the camera. Star Wars. I mean, that's all you need to know. No, it was
You're making some very good points.
all right. Star Wars. Star Wars.
Go on.
I'm convinced.
But it was man. Other than what was it, Shadows of the Empire? Those were the only 2 games that I'd played prior to anything on the PlayStation 2 that was Star Wars based. I think the next one was Battlefront that I played. So those 2 on the N64 were just amazing. Getting to play in a spaceship. I think that's one of the reasons Shadows of the Empire didn't make it higher on my list, is because I'm more about the space battles. Always am, always have been.
Right.
And getting to fly basically every single ship. And there was a code you could put in. I can't remember what it was, but it was something ridiculous. You could put in a code and it would unlock every ship, including the Millennium Falcon. And you could just run around holding, I think it was A to shoot. And the guns on top and bottom would just continuously fire. And they'd hit everything. You didn't have to aim them. They just continually shoot. It was so cool. And you could unlock the Naboo Starfighter and a TIE Interceptor and stuff like that with these special codes. But just being able to go to all these different planets, carry out some of the coolest attacks that were ever mentioned. Some of them weren't actually in Star Wars. They were just made up. But it was cool. Like, that was our first real, outside of the PC game, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. Like, this was the next step in flight simulators for Star Wars. Like, this was the next big thing for them. And I had a blast. I could, if I still had an N64 and Rogue Squadron, that would be the first game I teach my kids to play ever. I mean, it's just that good.
Flight Simulator, also an excellent game.
But yeah, that's how I feel about that.
All right. What about you, Justin? What did you think about this one?
Never played it.
Ouch.
It's so high up the list too. I feel like it was excusable for the stuff at the bottom of the list, but I'm a little bit embarrassed.
It happens. Chris?
Yeah, so I think Rogue Squadron, first of all, it had a great legacy, right? There were several Rogue Squadron games that Nintendo made for N64, GameCube. I don't know if they went any further than GameCube, but it was
okay.
great.
Most series didn't go further than GameCube.
It was a great combination.
Sega didn't go further than GameCube.
Oh!
It was a great combination of playing like you're in the movies, but also having a lot of cool original content. Because you could relive some of those famous battles, but there's a whole lot of more custom levels that weren't part of the movie. You could play A-Wings, you'd play Y-Wings. I believe there was a V-Wing that you could play, which is really cool. You got to play the snow speeder, so you got to do the whole wrap around the legs thing. That was always fun. Everyone wants to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one's in the Star Wars arcade too, isn't it? That mission?
Yeah. But you also got to play the snow speeder on other levels where you got to do the same thing. You got to do the wrap around the AT-AT's legs. I remember one was like a beach level, I think. I forget which game it was in, but it was the same idea. The codes were awesome because you could get all the extra fighters that weren't part of the main game. And really, I went back and watched some video of it earlier. The graphics hold up pretty well.
Yeah, I think that may be partly because you're seeing a graphic rendering of really old movie props. And I mean, I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that's the reason that they probably hold up a little better than a different kind of game. But there was a lot of variety in ships. And honestly, I haven't played this one very much because I never actually owned a copy of it. I think I rented it once and I played it with a couple of friends a handful of times. But I didn't play this one extensively. I don't have a whole lot to say about it, but I do remember being impressed by the ships themselves and the control setup and everything. And another thing that I would like to say about this, and this is somewhat more generic than specific to this game, one thing that was just really cool about the N64 era is that games that did include codes, the internet didn't really exist back then. I mean, it was there, but not in the way that it is now. And so codes were a lot harder to come by, and they mostly spread through either word of mouth or Nintendo Power or some other kind of gaming publication. And so,
case in point, did anyone not think that you could get Mew at the truck?
Nope, I totally believed that. I bought into that. I thought that there was a way to get Mew to evolve from a Magikarp. Like, there were all kinds of bullcrap urban legends that spread around like that.
Number 5.
So number 5 on the list, one that I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by, Mario Kart 64. And, of course, one of the premier racers. It's one of the most beloved series that Nintendo does. They put out a Mario Kart for every single console since the Super Nintendo, if I'm not mistaken. And it always is a crowd pleaser, and for good reason.
Well, I'm glad that it got ranked so highly despite the existence of Rainbow Road. That ruined so many people's lives. Yeah,
well, I mean, I kind of like the idea of racing through a gay pride parade throwing bombs. I mean, that's just not a... I don't know. I kind of like it. Caleb Colquitt is not endorsing violence in any way, nor does this constitute a call to action to commit violence against anyone. The joke is a playoff of the rainbow-themed nature of Rainbow Road from Mario Kart resembling a gay pride parade and the bob-omb items that can be used on that course. If this joke offends you, maybe you should develop a thicker skin and spend time worrying about something that actually matters, you delicate little snowflake. Yeah, we just got banned from YouTube. Go on, Chris. I'm sorry.
Somebody's going to clip that.
Props if you could make it around 3 corners without falling off that stage. But yeah, no, it was very fun. It was I think a premier multiplayer game for Nintendo, and it's just one of those, and it still is. You know, even the newer Mario Kart games, it's just something that you can always pull out if you're doing a game night with your friends. It doesn't take a whole lot of investment or learning to be able to play it. Most people can pick it up and play it pretty easily, and this was the start of a long legacy of Mario Kart games. So yeah, it was enjoyable. You could choose all the different characters. There were plenty of levels. It was just a really good, fun Nintendo spin on the racing genre.
Well, one of the biggest things you notice comparing it to like newer Mario Kart games, and the same goes for the Mario Party series, Nintendo did a little bit less at the time to try to even the playing field. You know, me and my roommates on the Mario Party that's on the Wii U call it Communist Bowser, because he shows up right at the end of the game, steals everybody's stars, and redistributes them. And, you know, you got the same kind of thing with unavoidable blue turtle shells, and, you know, you get like a chain chomp that takes you instantly to 4th place in some of the newer Mario Kart games. Mario Kart 64 had a lot less of that. You could even, if I remember correctly, dodge the blue turtle shells if you were crafty enough, because they didn't fly through the air. They actually went on the ground. So if you swerved around a banana peel the right way, you could actually get rid of it, you know, get it off of your tail. But it's a game that, even though it has so many sequels now, it really holds up over time. Like, I remember a while back, Coyotes is the name of a bar in Auburn. They would have Mario Kart 64 tournaments once a week with, like, you know, some bar tab up for the top prize or something. But like, people would come out to play Mario Kart 64. You know, not Mario Kart Double Dash, not Mario Kart 8, or, you know, whatever. Mario Kart 64 it holds up over time, and that longevity really speaks to it. We've
got a coffee shop up here that has Mario Kart set up in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I got to say, Justin, when I was thinking about what you were saying and sort of going through it in my own head, Mario Kart 64 is not one that really stands out to me as one of the best ones. And I know I was going to get some hate for that. But I think it's mostly just because I didn't own it, and because I didn't own it, I didn't play it very often. And some of the points that you were making actually convinced me that it's a much better game, probably mostly because you made a good point, which I think is actually accurate based on my experience with it. It is the one that is the most capitalist. So I don't know. Maybe it just moved up my list a little bit because you're right. There is a lot of communism going on in the more recent Mario
It's less forgiving for a low skill level.
Right. Nintendo has this weird obsession with making bad players just as good players in some of their games, and it is really frustrating. What about you, Andrew? Have you played this one?
I did, and I don't remember. I want to say I put it in my top 5, but I can't remember. Here's the thing. We never owned it, but a lot of these games that I ranked, I put them in their positions simply because of their replay value for me. And Mario Kart's one of those games, like even the 64 version, if we busted it out right now, I could stay up all night playing it with you guys.
Same.
Like,
yeah.
It's just fun. And I don't think there's many games that captivated me like that. Like our friends, you know Daniel Kelly.
Yeah.
They had it, and we could go over to their house any Sunday afternoon and just sit down and play it all afternoon until it's time to go to church. And just because I didn't own it doesn't mean that I didn't love it. It was just one of those games that kind of transcends time. It's just that good of a game. And even though they've made a great successors, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is.
Successor
but the games
works,
Sequels.
Sequels. Thank you. I knew it started with an S. I'm having a hard time tonight.
Swords.
I need to take the glasses off. Swords. But even
sequential editions.
What is it? Mario Kart 8? Is that the one that's out right now on the Switch?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Like that one to me, just
deluxe edition.
Graphics are great, but it's nothing like the first. Like the first one is just that good in my opinion. But like I said, I could play it all night. It doesn't matter how old I get. I'm just gonna keep going back to it. It's great.
Well, now
at least with 8, they've backed off the handicaps. They're not as bad as they had gotten for a while, but like, there's still an option where you can click it to make it to where you never run off the track.
Yeah, you're right. The Wii version, Mario Kart Wii, that one leans pretty heavy on the welfare. Like it definitely makes it a point to basically not reward players for being good at the game, which really annoys me. But one of the things that you brought up, Andrew, is comparing it to other games in the series and the graphics being so different. And one thing that I wanted to point out is somebody who played it some, but maybe not nearly as much as everybody else here tonight. I really do appreciate the fact that even though this is actually the second game of the series, because they had Super Nintendo, like even as somebody who doesn't really cherish playing the game as much as probably everybody else that's present here, I really appreciate its legacy. Like you can tell how much other Mario Kart games drew from Mario Kart 64, and a lot of those features you have to sit back and think, I don't know, would they have come up with that later if they hadn't done it in 64 first? And so, I mean, you've got to appreciate it, if nothing else, just for that. Like the massive money printing machine that is Mario Kart that Nintendo has created for itself, a lot of that started with the 64 version. All right, guys, that is going to be it for this episode of the Geekend. We've covered numbers 10 through 5. Next week, we will be back here, same time, same channel, Friday, 6 p.m., to cover the top 4 Nintendo 64 games of all time. Be sure to check it out to see what our picks were for the best Nintendo 64 games. Thank you so much for being with us. Have a great weekend, and until next time, stay the course, friends. Tactics is a production of News Radio 1440 and Cumulus Media Montgomery. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Cumulus Media or our business partners. Graphics by Jessica Dawson. Video production by Jackson Dean. Broadcast studio provided by Faulkner University. Location studio provided by the Dalreda Church of Christ. Copy